Claire Bennett sat by the window at Harborview Bistro, watching raindrops trace patterns down the glass. The upscale restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. She'd chosen a red dress for tonight, bold and confident, even though she felt anything but. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a soft ponytail, and she'd practiced her speech a dozen times in the mirror that afternoon. Her blind date, Marcus, was 15 minutes late. Claire's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "How's it going? Is he nice?" Claire typed back, still waiting, trying to stay optimistic. When Marcus finally arrived, he was tall and well-dressed in a grey button-down shirt and dark slacks, his hair styled perfectly. He looked around the restaurant with the air of someone assessing whether the venue was worthy of him. When he spotted Claire, his expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for her to read them all. He approached the table but didn't sit down immediately. Claire stood to greet him, smiling warmly and extending her hand. Marcus shook it briefly, then pulled out his phone. "Look," he said, already typing, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Claire read his lips carefully as she'd been deaf since birth and had become exceptionally skilled at it, but the meaning behind his words was clear even before she fully processed them. She gestured to the tablet she always carried, pulling it from her purse and typing quickly. "Nice to meet you too. Should we order?" Marcus glanced at the tablet, then back at his phone. He typed something and showed her the screen. "I didn't know you were deaf. My friend who set this up didn't mention it. I'm sorry, but I'm not really equipped to date someone with special needs. This won't work." The words hit like physical blows. Special needs, as if she were a problem to be solved rather than a person to be known. Claire had heard variations of this before. Well, not heard exactly, but experienced. The slow fade after a first date, the awkward explanations, the well-meaning but pitying looks. But she'd never had someone reject her quite this bluntly, quite this quickly. She typed on her tablet, "I'm not special needs, I'm just deaf. We could still have a nice dinner." Marcus was already backing away. "I don't think so. Sorry for wasting your time." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Claire alone at the window table with two menus and the sympathetic looks of nearby diners who'd clearly witnessed the exchange. She felt her cheeks burning, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall in public. Claire was gathering her things, preparing to leave as quickly and quietly as possible, when movement at the adjacent table caught her eye. A man was standing up, probably in his late 30s, wearing a grey shirt similar to Marcus's but somehow looking more comfortable in it. He had kind eyes and an earnest expression, and his hands were moving in fluid, deliberate gestures. It took Claire a moment to realize he was signing to her. "That man is an idiot," his hands said in clear, confident American Sign Language. "You deserve so much better than someone who can't see past their own narrow assumptions." Claire's breath caught. She signed back automatically, "You know ASL? My daughter is deaf," he signed, gesturing to a young girl of about 9 sitting at his table, watching the interaction with wide eyes. "We've been learning together since she was 2. I'm Daniel, and that's Sophie." Sophie waved enthusiastically, then signed, "Your dress is really pretty. Red is my favorite color." Claire found herself smiling genuinely for the first time all evening. She signed back, "Thank you. I love your butterfly clips." Daniel continued, his sign smooth and natural. "We couldn't help but notice what happened. I know it's forward of me, but Sophie and I were about to order dinner, and we'd love some company if you're interested. No pressure, just a friendly meal with people who actually deserve your time." Claire hesitated. She'd come here for date, not charity. But something in Daniel's expression told her this wasn't pity. It was simply kindness, offered freely by someone who understood what she'd just experienced. "I'd like that," she signed, and meant it. As Claire moved to their table, she noticed the other diners watching with expressions that had shifted from sympathy to approval. Daniel pulled out a chair for her, and Sophie immediately launched into animated conversation about her school, her friends, and the art project she was working on that involved way too much glitter. "Mom says our house will be finding glitter for the next 10 years. Sophie signed with exaggerated drama. "Your mom sounds wise." Claire signed back, then paused. "Is she?" "She's at a conference in Chicago," Daniel explained. "Rachel's a speech therapist, actually works primarily with deaf and hard of hearing kids. Sophie's condition is genetic. We found out when she was 18 months old. It was scary at first, not going to lie. We didn't know anything about deaf culture, about ASL, about any of it. He paused, his hand still for a moment as he gathered his thoughts. But then we started learning. We connected with the deaf community. We realized Sophie wasn't broken nor limited, as she just experienced the world differently. And honestly, learning ASL, becoming part of this community, it's enriched all our lives in ways I never expected. Clara felt something loosening in her chest, a tension she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Not everyone sees it that way. Most people see the deafness first and the person second, if at all. Then most people are missing out. Danielle signed firmly. Sophie's deafness is part of who she is, but it's not a limitation. If anything, it's taught our whole family about resilience, creativity, and finding different ways to connect. Over dinner, which arrived through a series of interactions where Daniel smoothly interpreted with the waiter, making sure everyone's needs were met, Claire learned about Daniel's work as an architect, about Sophie's passion for painting, about the family's annual trips to deaf culture festivals. She shared her own story, growing up in a hearing family who'd learned to sign, her career as a graphic designer, her frustrations with the world that too often saw her deafness as a deficit rather than simply a difference. Sophie asked her questions with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. Do you ever wish you could hear? Claire considered the question carefully before signing her response. Sometimes I'm curious about what sounds are like, but I don't feel like I'm missing something. This is just how I experience the world. Do you ever wish you had different color eyes? Sophie giggled silently, her whole face lighting up. No, that would be weird. These are my eyes. Exactly, Claire signed. This is who I am. Daniel watched the exchange with a soft smile. You know, he signed, Rachel and I have always told Sophie that her deafness doesn't define her, but it is part of what makes her who she is. We don't want her to feel limited by it, but we also don't want her to feel like she needs to hide it or apologize for it. That's the balance, isn't it? Claire signed thoughtfully. Not letting it be all you are, but not pretending it doesn't matter either. As the meal continued, Claire realized she was having one of the most comfortable, genuine conversations she'd had in months. There was no awkwardness, no constant clarification, no feeling of being a burden. Daniel and Sophie signed naturally, included her completely in their jokes and stories, treated her as simply another person rather than a puzzle to be solved. When the waiter brought dessert menus, Sophie signed to Claire conspiratorially, Dad always says he's too full for dessert, but then he eats half of mine. It's basically stealing. Daniel feigned outrage. I do not. I take maybe 1 bite. 3 bites, Sophie corrected, holding up 3 fingers with exaggerated emphasis. Clara laughed at a sound she couldn't hear but could feel in her chest and signed, We should definitely order the chocolate cake then. Let's see how much he doesn't want dessert. As they shared the enormous slice of cake that arrived, Daniel did indeed eat at least 3 bites. As the conversation turned more serious, Daniel put down his fork and signed slowly, making sure he had Claire's full attention. I hope this isn't too forward, but what that man did tonight was cruel and ignorant. You handled it with grace, but you shouldn't have had to. You deserve someone who sees you, all of you, and celebrates it rather than running from it. Claire felt tears prickling again, but these were different from the ones she'd fought earlier. Sometimes I wonder if that person exists. If I'm going to spend my whole life explaining myself, proving I'm worth the extra effort. It's not extra effort, Danielle signed firmly. It's just effort. Every relationship takes effort. Every person worth knowing requires you to step outside your comfort zone a little. The fact that with you it involves learning sign language instead of, I don't know, learning to appreciate someone's weird hobby or unusual schedule, that doesn't make it more difficult, just different. Sophie had been watching the conversation intently. Now she reached across the table and tapped Clara's hand to get her attention. Miss Claire, do you have a boyfriend? Sophie, Danielle signed with gentle reproach, but Claire laughed. It's okay. No, I don't have a boyfriend right now. I'm still looking for the right person. Sophie glanced at her father, then back to Claire. her expression thoughtful beyond her years. Dad doesn't have a girlfriend either. Mom says he's too busy making sure I'm happy to look for his own happiness. Sophie. Daniel sighed again, his cheeks slightly flushed, but Claire could see the love in his eyes as he looked at his daughter. What? Sophie sighed innocently. I'm just saying what's true. The evening wound down eventually, though none of them seemed eager to end it. As they stood to leave, Daniel signed to Claire. Would you be interested in getting coffee sometime? Not a date necessarily. I realized tonight was supposed to be your date night and I've probably complicated things. But as friends, Sophie and I are part of a deaf community social group that meets every other Sunday. We'd love for you to join us if you're interested. Clara felt something warm and hopeful blooming in her chest. I'd really like that. And Daniel, tonight turned out better than any date could have been. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting us. Danielle signed back. 3 months later, Clara was a regular at the Sunday social group, had been to Sophie's art show at school, and had started teaching a graphic design workshop for deaf teens at the community center. She and Daniel had fallen into an easy friendship that was slowly, carefully becoming something more. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people learning each other's languages in all the ways that mattered. One evening, sitting on Daniel's porch while Sophie painted inside, Daniel signed to Claire, that first night at the restaurant, when I saw that guy walk away from you, I was so angry. Not just for Sophie, though I thought about her growing up and potentially facing that kind of rejection, but angry for you, this person I didn't even know yet, who deserved basic human decency and didn't get it. Clara signed back, if he hadn't walked away, I wouldn't have met you. Silver linings, Danielle signed with a smile. More than that, Clara corrected. Marcus's rejection wasn't a door closing up, it was me finally being in the right place at the right time to find people who speak my language. And I don't just mean ASL. Daniel reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. In sign language, holding hands meant pausing conversation, but they'd learned there were some things that transcended words in any language. Sophie appeared in the doorway, paint on her shirt and hands. Are you guys being mushy out here? Because dinner's almost ready and we're having tacos. Clara laughed and signed back. Tacos sound perfect, much better than fancy restaurant food anyway. As they headed inside, Clara reflected on how a night that had started with rejection had led her to this unexpected family, this community, this sense of belonging she'd been searching for without fully realizing it. Sometimes the worst moments were actually redirections, pushing you away from what wouldn't work toward what absolutely would. And sometimes, the right person wasn't the one you dressed up for. It was the one who signed you deserve better across a restaurant and meant it enough to show you what better actually looked like.